Yo, ladies and gentlemen, it's your sweet white colonizer coming to you live from an undisclosed location. Let's take a look at this clip from the Young American Foundation.
The issue in the first place, as you have possibly heard, is that Israel is occupying Palestinian land, and if Israel would end the occupation, then everything would be all right and there would be peace. Have you ever heard that? Okay. Everything about that statement is wrong. There is no occupation, and there isn't even any Palestinian land.
Damn. Damn. Sir coming out with some strong statements.
And if Israel were to get off what is supposed to be the Palestinian land, there would not be peace. Every part of it is wrong. So what is the real situation? The real situation is that this is a religious war that has a political aspect. It is not a war over land that is being occupied. And yet it is. Paradoxically, both are true at the same time. The reason why goes back to the Islamic holy book, the Quran, which in chapter 2, verse 191, you can open it now and see, it says, drive them out from where they drove you out. Drive them out from where they drove you out. In those just a few words, that's the whole conflict right there. Now, even that has to be explained further, because the Israelis did not drive the Palestinians out of this land. If you go back to 1948, when the modern state of Israel was founded, you will see, if you read the newspapers of the time and read all the debates in the United Nations and all the international discussions about the creation of the state of Israel, you will come across the fact that
I gotta just commentate for a fact that I love the setup of where they're sitting. They're like just chilling in a ranch. Rancho de Cielo. The Reagan Ranch. Like, what a cool place to have a conversation about Israel-Palestine. Sorry for interrupting.
the international discussions about the creation of the state of Israel, you will come across the fact that the Arab League told the Palestinian Arabs to leave the area when the state of Israel declared its independence in May 1948. Why did they tell them to leave the area? Because the surrounding Arab states, Saudi Arabia, Egypt, Syria, Lebanon, Jordan, were declaring war on Israel as soon as it declared its independence, and they planned to destroy Israel completely. They wanted the Arabs out of the line of fire so that they would not be hurt, and then in a few weeks, when there was no more Israel, they could come back. Well, as it turned out, they did not win the war. But that still does not mean that the Israelis drove them out. They left.
I have to also add, it's a little bit more nuanced than just that. The Arabs of the Levant, the Arabs of Palestine, quote unquote, they were moving their locations around from every country they were in, whether it was in Lebanon or in Syria or Negev or even in parts of the Hijaz and the Khalij, that they were moving into Israel for business opportunity because the Jews were coming back home. So some of these populations had only been there for a few years, some for a few decades at most. And it's not saying that all Palestinian population was like that, but it's not like these people, like a lot of these people didn't have these like ancient ties to the land like they make it seem today, like they've been there for thousands of years. And that's why you have a lot of Palestinian families with the last name Halabi, which means from Syria, or Hijazi, which means from the Hijaz, or Haliji, which means from the Halij, or you have Al-Masri, you have there's an infinite amount of names that give away, or last names that give away the answer that a lot of these people are not actually from there. They came from a different land.
Once they left, they sided with states that were avowed enemies of Israel. And so they weren't allowed back in. It's perfectly reasonable. The mythology, however, ever since then, among the Palestinian Arabs, has been that they were driven out, and thus they have a divine command, a command from Allah, the supreme God, to drive out the Israelis. Because that statement, drive them out from where they drove you out, being in the Quran, is the word of Allah, the perfect word of Allah that has existed forever with him in paradise and was delivered through the angel Gabriel to the Prophet Muhammad, and consequently, there's no arguing with it, there's no negotiating, there's no mitigating it, there's no compromise, there's no partition or sharing. It is all the land of the Muslims. There is no size that the state of Israel could be that would be acceptable in this view. If the state of Israel were the size of this barn, it would not be acceptable, and Hamas would still be fighting against it. If the state of Israel were the size of a postage stamp, it would not be acceptable, and Hamas would still be fighting against it.
Correct. Some people don't know the concepts of Dar al-Salam and Dar al-Harb in the Muslim world, which means the house of war and the house of peace. In the Muslim narrative, once they conquer land, which the Islamic caliphates conquered Palestine, they conquered the Levant. They're not from there. They colonized the land. They took over it. Once they did, they turned it into this concept called Dar al-Salam, which means the house that has come under the peace of the Muslims by force. People, ethnic minorities, paying jizya tax and living in dhimmi status to them because Muslim supremacists are Muslim supremacists, and Arabs generally, or Arabism is a supremacist movement very similar to white supremacy. When they came under this house of the Dar al-Salam, once it gets taken over by, let's say, the Christians who took it over after the Inquisition, or the British who took it over from the Ottomans, it turns into Dar al-Harb, or Dar al-Harb, which means the house of war. And it needs to be liberated by the Islamic Ummah. It needs to be not eliminated, but liberated by the Islamic faith. And until it gets liberated, it is known as the house of war. And you technically, as a Muslim, should wage jihad against it. Now, it's clear that not every single Muslim takes up this line of view, because there are Muslims in the state of Israel who are living there in peace. But what he said there at the end, I think it's really important, because he said, no matter what, Hamas would take up action against the Israelis. And that's true. It doesn't matter if they were Muslim Israelis or Arab Israelis or Druze or Christian. It doesn't matter. Being a Jew doesn't save you from the wrath of Arab extremism. You can be a Muslim, you can be a Druze, you can be a Christian, you can be anybody. You could be a so-called Palestinian, and there are many so-called Palestinians that lived in Israel, and especially during October 7th. And you have people who are taken hostage, you have people who are massacred. You have people like Hashim al-Sayed, who was just released from Hamas captivity yesterday. They did a big show for all the other hostages except for him. But he was held in Hamas captivity for 10 years, an autistic Muslim Arab. Everybody would see him as Palestinian. He was a Bedouin from the south of Israel. Everybody would consider him Palestinian until you talk to the pro-Palestine nuts on the left, who the Free Palestine narrative would say, no, he was a Zionist Israeli, so he deserves to be held hostage for 10 years in Hamas captivity. In essence, if you ever need proof that the whole Free Palestine narrative is bullshit, come over to your boy's channel. I'll help you figure it all out. With that being said, thank you guys for supporting my channel. I appreciate it. Please do consider supporting my work financially down below in the description, and I'll see you in the next one. I love you guys a long time. Goodbye, class. If you believe in my content and want to support me, just know your help is needed. There's a bunch of great ways to support me, being PayPal, Buy Me a Coffee, or joining my Patreon community down below. Patreon is the best way to support my channel, and you'll get a bunch of cool perks depending on what tier you join. Another great way to support me is by buying my merchandise on thetravelingclat.com. I regularly drop new merch designs like this beautiful hat, or this amazing shirt, where you can support the channel and get something cool for yourself. I also have an amazing Discord community with people from all over the world. Thank you so much for your support.